Thomas and friends, making tracks to great destinations.
Thomas is a tank engine who lives at a big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He's a fussy little engine too, always pulling coaches about ready for the big engines to take on long journeys. And when trains come in, he pulls the empty coaches away so that the big engines can go and rest. Thomas thinks no engine works as hard as he does. He loves playing tricks on them, including Gordon, the biggest and proudest engine of all. Thomas likes whistling rudely at him. "Wake up, lazy bones, why don't you work hard like me?" One day after pulling the big express, Gordon had arrived back at the sidings very tired. He was just going to sleep when Thomas came up in his cheeky way. "Wake up, lazy bones, do some hard work for a change. You can't catch me." And off he ran laughing. Instead of going to sleep again, Gordon thought how he could get back at Thomas. One morning, Thomas wouldn't wake up. His driver and fireman couldn't make him start. His fire went out and there was not enough steam. It was nearly time for the express. People were waiting, but the coaches weren't ready. At last, Thomas started. Oh dear, he yawned. He fussed into the station where Gordon was waiting. "Hurry up, you," said Gordon. "Hurry yourself," replied Thomas. Gordon began making his plan. "Yes," said Gordon, "I will." And almost before the coaches had stopped moving,
Gordon reversed quickly and was coupled to the train. "Get in quickly, please," he whistled. Thomas usually pushed behind the big trains to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first. This time Gordon started so quickly they forgot to uncouple Thomas. Gordon's chance had come. Thomas was going faster than he had ever gone before. He was out of breath and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on.
"I shall never be the same again," he thought sadly. "My wheels will be quite worn out."
at last they stopped at a station. Thomas was uncoupled, and he felt very silly and exhausted. Next, he went on to a turntable, thinking of everyone laughing at him. And then he ran onto a siding out of the way. "Well, little Thomas," chuckled Gordon, "now you know what hard work means, don't you?" Poor Thomas couldn't answer. He had no breath. He just puffed slowly away to rest and had a long, long drink. He went home very slowly and was careful afterwards never to be cheeky to Gordon again. One day, Edward was in the shed where he lived with the other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. "The driver won't choose you again," said Gordon. "He wants strong engines like us." But the driver and fireman felt sorry for Edward. Would you like to come out today?" "Oh, yes, please," said Edward. So they lit his fire, made lots of steam, and Edward puffed away. The other engines were very cross at being left behind. Edward worked hard all day. The coaches thought he was very kind, and the driver was very pleased. "I'm going out again tomorrow," Edward told the other engines that night. "What do you think of that?" But he didn't hear what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Next morning, Edward woke up to find nothing had changed. Gordon was still boasting. "You watch me, little Edward, as I rush through with the express. That will be a splendid sight for you. Goodbye, little Edward. Look out for me this afternoon." Edward went off to do some shunting. Edward liked shunting. It was fun playing with trucks. He would come up quietly and give them a push. Then he would stop and the silly trucks would go bump into each other. "Oh!" they cried. "Whatever is happening?" Edward played till there were no more trucks. Then he stopped to rest. Presently he heard a whistle. Gordon was very cross. Instead of nice shining coaches, he was pulling a lot of very dirty trucks. "A goods train, a goods train, a goods train," he grumbled. "The shame of it, the shame of it, oh, the shame of it." Edward laughed and went to find some more trucks. Then there was trouble. "Gordon can't get up the hill," the porter called to Edward's driver. "Will you take Edward and push him, please?" They found Gordon halfway up and very cross. His driver and fireman were talking to him severely. "You're not trying." "I can't do it," said Gordon. "The noisy trucks hold an engine back so." Edward's driver came up. "We've come to push." "No use at all," said Gordon. "You wait and see," replied Edward's driver. They brought the train back to the bottom of the hill. "I'm ready," said Edward. "No good," grumbled Gordon. They pulled and pushed as hard as they could. "I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it," puffed Gordon. "I will do it, I will do it, I will do it," puffed Edward. Edward pushed and puffed and puffed and pushed as hard as ever he could. And almost before he realized it, Gordon found himself at the top of the hill. "I've done it, I've done it, I've done it," he said proudly. He forgot all about Edward and didn't wait to say thank you. Edward was left out of breath and far behind. He ran on to the next station, and there he found that the driver and fireman were very pleased with him. The fireman gave him a nice long drink, and the driver said, "I'll get out my paint tomorrow and give you a beautiful coat of blue with red stripes. Then you will be the smartest engine in the shed." Once, an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. It went into a tunnel and squeaked through its funnel and wouldn't come out again. The engine's name is Henry. His driver and fireman argued with him, but he would not move. "The rain will spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes," he said. The guard blew his whistle till he had no more breath and waved his flag till his arms ached, but Henry still stayed in the tunnel and blew steam at him. "I'm not going to spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes for you." Then along came Sir Topham Hatt, the man in charge of all the engines on Sodor. They call him the Fat Controller. "We will pull you out," said the Fat Controller, but Henry only blew steam at him. Everyone pulled except the Fat Controller, because, he said, "my doctor has forbidden me to pull." But still Henry stayed in the tunnel. Then they tried pushing from the other end. The Fat Controller said, "1, 2, 3, push!" But he didn't help. "My doctor has forbidden me to push," he said. They pushed and pushed and pushed, but still Henry stayed in the tunnel. At last Thomas came along. The guard waved his red flag and stopped him. Everyone argued with Henry. "Look, it has stopped raining," they said. "Yes, but it will begin again soon," said Henry, "and what would become of my green paint with red stripes then?" Thomas pushed and pushed as hard as ever he could. But still Henry stayed in the tunnel. Eventually, even the Fat Controller gave up. "We shall take away your rails," he said, "and leave you here for always and always and always." They took up the old rails and built a wall in front of him so that Henry couldn't get out of the tunnel anymore. All he could do was watch the trains rushing through the other tunnel. He was very sad because he thought no one would ever see his lovely green paint with red stripes again. As time went on, Edward and Gordon would often pass by. Edward would say, "Peep, peep, hello." And Gordon would say, "Poop, poop, poop, serves you right." Poor Henry had no steam to answer. His fire had gone out. Sudden dirt from the tunnel had spoilt his lovely green paint and red stripes anyway. He wondered if he would ever be allowed to pull trains again. But I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you? Gordon always pulled the big express. He was proud of being the only engine strong enough to do so. It was full of important people, like the Fat Controller, and Gordon was seeing how fast he could go. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he said. "Tickety-tock, tickety-tock, tickety-tock," said the coaches. In a minute, Gordon would see the tunnel where Henry stood bricked up and lonely. "Oh dear," thought Henry, "why did I worry about rain spoiling my lovely coat of paint? Will the Fat Controller ever forgive me and let me out again?" "I'm going to poop at Henry," said Gordon. He was almost there when... And there was Gordon going slower and slower in a cloud of steam. His driver stopped the train. "What has happened to me?" asked Gordon. "I feel so weak." "You've burst your safety valve," said the driver. "You can't pull the train anymore." "Oh dear," said Gordon. We were going so nicely, too. And look, there's Henry laughing at me. Everyone came to see Gordon. Huh, said the Fat Controller. I never liked these big engines. Always going wrong. Send for another engine at once. While the guard went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon, who had enough puff to slink onto the siding out of the way. Edward was the only engine left. I'll come and try, he said. Huh, said Gordon. That's no use. Edward can't push the train. Edward puffed and pushed and pushed and puffed, but he couldn't move the heavy coaches. I told you so, said Gordon. Why not let Henry try? Yes, said the Fat Controller, I will. Will you help pull this train, Henry? He asked. Oh, yes, said Henry. When Henry had got up steam, he puffed out. He was dirty and covered with cobwebs. Oh, I am stiff, he groaned. Have a run to ease your joints and find a turntable, said the Fat Controller. When Henry came back, he felt much better. Then they coupled him up. Peep, peep, said Edward, I'm ready. Peep, 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 said Henry, so am I. Pull hard, we'll do it. Pull hard, we'll do it. They puffed together. We've done it together, we've done it together, said Edward and Henry. You've done it, hooray! You've done it, hooray! Sang the coaches. Everyone was excited. The Fat Controller leaned out of the window to wave at Edward and Henry. But the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field where a goat ate it for tea. They never stopped till they came to the station at the end of the line. The passengers all said thank you, and the Fat Controller promised Henry a new coat of paint. On their way home, Edward and Henry helped Gordon back to the shed. All three engines are now great friends. Henry doesn't mind the rain now. He knows that the best way to keep his paint nice is not to run into tunnels, but to ask his driver to rub him down when the day's work is over. Thomas the Tank Engine was grumbling to the other engines. I spend my time pulling coaches about ready for you to take out on journeys. The other engines laughed. Why can't I pull passenger trains too? You're too impatient, they said. You'd be sure to leave something behind. Rubbish, said Thomas. I'll show you. One night, he and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard, but he didn't get better. He felt just as bad next morning. Henry usually pulled the first train, and Thomas had to get his coaches ready. If Henry is ill, he thought, perhaps I shall pull his train. Thomas ran to find the coaches. Come along, he fussed. There's plenty of time, they grumbled. Thomas took them to the platform and wanted to run round in front at once. But his driver wouldn't let him. Don't be impatient, Thomas. Thomas waited and waited. The people got in. The guard and station master walked up and down. The porter banged the doors, and still Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited. The Fat Controller came to see what was the matter, and the guard and the station master told him about Henry. Find another engine, he ordered. There's only Thomas, they said. You'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now. So Thomas ran round to the front and back down on the coaches ready to start. "Don't be impatient," said his driver. "Wait till everything is ready." But Thomas was too excited to listen. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train, or perhaps the driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started. As he passed the first signal box, men waved and shouted, but he didn't stop. "They're waving because I'm such a splendid engine," he thought importantly. "Henry says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy. Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed, pretending to be like Gordon. "People have never seen me pulling a train before. It's nice of them to wave," and he whistled. "Peep, peep, thank you." Then he came to a signal at danger. "Bother," he thought. "I must stop, and I was going so nicely too. What a nuisance signals are." He blew an angry peep, peep on his whistle. The signalman ran up. "Hello, Thomas," he said. "What are you doing here?" "I'm pulling a train," said Thomas. "Can't you see?" "Where are your coaches then?" Thomas looked back. "Why, bless me," he said, "if we haven't left them behind." "Yes," said the signalman. "You'd better go back quickly and fetch them." Poor Thomas was so sad he nearly cried. "Cheer up," said his driver. "Let's go back quickly and try again." At the station, all the passengers were talking at once. They were telling the Fat Controller what a bad railway it was. But when Thomas came back, they saw how sad he was and couldn't be cross. He was coupled to the train, and this time he really pulled it. But for a long time afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said, "Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull a train but forgot about the coaches." Thomas the Tank Engine wouldn't stop being a nuisance. Night after night, he kept the other engines awake. "I'm tired of pushing coaches. I want to see the world." The other engines didn't take much notice, for Thomas was a little engine with a long tongue. But one night, Edward came to the shed. He was a kind little engine and felt sorry for Thomas. "I've got some trucks to take home tomorrow. If you take them instead of me, I'll push coaches in the yard." "Thank you," said Thomas. "That will be nice." Next morning, Edward and Thomas asked their drivers, and when they said yes, Thomas ran off happily to find trucks. Now, trucks are silly and noisy. They talk a lot and don't attend to what they are doing. And I'm sorry to say they play tricks on an engine who is not used to them. Edward knew all about trucks. He warned Thomas to be careful, but Thomas was too excited to listen. The shunter fastened the coupling, and when the signal dropped, Thomas was ready. The guard blew his whistle. "Peep, peep," answered Thomas, and started off. But the trucks weren't ready. "Oh, oh, oh," they screamed. "Wait, Thomas, wait." But Thomas wouldn't wait. Come on," he puffed. All right, don't fuss. All right, don't fuss," grumbled the trucks. Thomas began going faster and faster. "Whee!" he whistled as he rushed through Henry's tunnel. Hurry, hurry, called Thomas. He was feeling very proud of himself, but the trucks grew crosser and crosser. At last, Thomas slowed down as he came to Gordon's Hill.
Look out for the train.
Steady now, steady, warned the driver as they reached the top. He began to put on the brakes. We're stopping, called Thomas. No, 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 answered the trucks, bumping into each other. Go on, go on. Before the driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them from making him go too fast. Stop pushing, he hissed, but the trucks took no notice. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. There's the station. Oh dear, what shall I do? He cried. He rattled straight through and swerved into the goods yard. Thomas shut his eyes. I must stop. When he opened his eyes, he saw he had stopped just in front of the buffers. There watching him was the fat controller. What are you doing here, Thomas? He asked. I brought Edward's trucks, Thomas answered. Why did you come so fast? I didn't mean to. I was pushed, said Thomas. You've got a lot to learn about trucks then, little Thomas. After pushing them about here for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine. Every day, the fat controller came to the station to catch his train. Hello, he always said to Thomas. Remember, don't be impatient, Thomas. You can never be as strong and fast as Gordon, but you can be a really useful engine. Don't let the silly trucks tease you. There were lots of trucks, and Thomas worked very hard pushing and pulling them into place. There was also a small coach and two strange things his driver called cranes. That's the breakdown train, he told Thomas. The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and trucks. One day, Thomas was in the yard. Suddenly, he heard an engine whistling. Help! Help! A goods train came rushing through much too fast. The engine was James, and he was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire. They're pushing me, he panted. On, laughed the trucks. Still whistling, help, help! Poor James disappeared. I'd like to teach those trucks a lesson, said Thomas the tank engine. Soon came the alarm. James is off the line. The breakdown train, quickly! Thomas was coupled on, and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. Hurry, 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 he puffed. He wasn't pretending to be like Gordon. He really meant it. Bother those trucks and their tricks. I hope poor James isn't hurt. James's driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt. Never mind, James, they said. It wasn't your fault. It was those wooden brakes they gave you. We always said they were no good. Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled the unhurt trucks out of the way. Oh dear, they groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. This'll teach you a lesson, he told the trucks. And they answered, yes it will. They left the broken trucks, then with 2 cranes they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. The Fat Controller was waiting anxiously for them. "Well, Thomas," he said, "I've heard all about it and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint. And you shall have a branch line all to yourself." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Thomas. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line and 2 coaches called Annie and Clarabelle. He puffs proudly backwards and forwards with them all day. He is never lonely. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry, but never forgets to say poop poop, and Thomas always whistles peep peep in return.
They're 2, they're 4, they're 6, they're 8, shunting trucks and hauling freight. Red and green and brown and blue, they're the really useful crew, all with different roles to play around Tidmouth sheds or far away. Down the hills and round the bends, Thomas and his friends. Thomas, he's the cheeky one. James is vain but lots of fun. Percy pulls the mail on time. Gordon thunders down the line. Emily really knows her stuff. Henry a toots and a halves and a pumps. Edward wants to help and share. Toby, he is wise and square. They're 2, they're 4, they're 6, they're 8, shunting trucks and hauling freight. Red and green and brown and blue, they're the really useful crew, and all with different roles to play around Tidmouth sheds or far away. Down the hills and round the bends, Thomas and his friends. It's Thomas the tank engine, hip 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 hooray. Chugga chugga chug chug chuff chuff chuff, he rides along the way. And when you hear that whistle, it can only be one train. Our favorite little engine, Thomas is his name.